What's up, guys? My name is Ed Ricker, and to my left is the deep, dark, rectangular chasm of my soul. Alright guys, so what we're talking about today is building a video editing computer and what you need to think about to create the optimal editing experience within a budget of maybe $2,000 to $3,000, probably $2,500. Now this is going to be a two-parter. The first part today, we're going to talk about the computer specs. The hardware that's inside and what it takes to run a computer to edit 4K footage or beyond. Then tomorrow we're going to talk about actual media storage and media backup, because that really kind of is its own video. If you know much about video editing in terms of drives and space and storage, you know that gets kind of complicated. So part 2 is actually coming out later on, and I'm going to link to that in the video description and at the end of this video, so check that out. I'm also listing all of these products with their links in the video description below. So, part 1, computer specs. Let's start with the case. Let's open up this dark chasm of my soul. You'll see that this is actually the R5 Define Series titanium case. The front is actually titanium and it's shiny. It just doesn't show that well in this video. But anyway, we'll start off with the fact that it has dust filtration, along with 2 fans at the front, and of course space for 2 Blu-ray burners or something like that. The big feature about this case is that also these panels, like you can see this one here a little bit, you can also see this one, they have sound absorption on them. So when your computer is running really hot and maybe you want to record a voiceover or something like that, you're not going to be hearing a whole lot of computer noise. I appreciate that. Maybe you don't care, but I do. It does add to the weight of the case though. This thing is pretty heavy. Oh, wow. All right, I had to move my lights a little bit to see inside of this, but basically you see that I have a lot of space for hard drives and a lot of space for hard drive expansion. Now, we are talking about hard drives in the next video, but I just wanted to let you know that this is a good case for that sort of thing. We have the power supply, we have the graphics processing unit, we have the central processing unit behind this water cooler, and also we have our RAM on this wonderful motherboard. So those are pretty much the 5 things that you gotta think about: power supply, GPU, CPU, motherboard, and RAM. Again, video storage, next video. Now the sound absorption panels are on both sides of this case, as well as the top and the bottom and the front. The back is not sound absorbed, but that's okay. I'm gonna show you the cable management that I have back here. You can kind of see all my cables are right here, and these are actually solid state drive placement holders, but I don't have them there because I like to access them a little bit more easier. So I have them up front where all the hard drives are. So let's start with the motherboard. I'm using the ASRock Extreme 6 Z97 motherboard. It supports 32 gigabytes of RAM, and it's the LGA 1150 CPU socket type. What I was thinking about when I made this, not only that it would match my RAM color scheme, but that it also fit inside my case well, and that it supported the RAM and the CPU type that I wanted. Z97 is also not a shabby chipset for video editing. You could go better, you could go worse, but Z97 seemed to be the middle ground in terms of price and also performance. Now, one conscious decision that I did make for the motherboard purchasing was that it had an eSATA port right here, this red one. And that's because any of my external G Technology drives actually use the eSATA port. And eSATA is actually pretty quick. It's almost as fast as USB 3 in some cases. Some cases it's actually faster. It also has upgradability if I also wanted to add another graphics card, which we're talking about the EVGA GeForce GTX 1080, which is the new graphics card from NVIDIA. These actually just launched earlier this year, and I was running a GTX 980 Ti before then, which was very power hungry. It ran hot, so actually I was able to save power by upgrading to the GTX 1080, and my power supply is only a 650 watt power supply, and it powers all of this just fine. So when you're thinking about 4K footage and you want to edit 4K footage, you got to think about a really good graphics card. That might be one of the more expensive components of your computer, because your computer uses all that stuff. If you use Premiere, you're going to use the CUDA cores with the Mercury acceleration engine in Premiere, and also After Effects. The GTX 1080 SC also has 8 gigabytes GDDR5X RAM. Right now there's also like the 1080 Ti and stuff coming out, but for the most part, the GTX 1080 for the price point and for the power consumption is probably the best you're gonna do for a while. But the 1070 is also a good choice because it's cheaper, much cheaper than the 1080, but it still has great performance and it outperforms the 970 in some ways and maybe even the 980 Ti in some ways. There's also upgradability on the motherboard, so if I wanted to add a second 1080 for a SLI setup, I could. The GTX 1080 also has enough video ports to pretty much cover all of your needs. You got one HDMI, you have 3 display ports, and you have a DVI port. So I actually use the HDMI, one display, and the DVI for all 3 of my monitors that I use. Now, I used to work for a university as the videographer, and I also did all the video editing. And what they had set me up with before I even started was this big Mac computer. It was a wonderful Mac computer. I really liked it, except for the fact that they equipped me with Radeon 5770s, 2 of them in SLI. And that really didn't work well with Premiere because ATI Radeon cards don't actually have the CUDA cores that Premiere and After Effects can utilize. So actually taking those out and putting in an NVIDIA card really boosted the performance, one NVIDIA card, because of the CUDA cores involved. So for video editing, I really don't suggest a Radeon card. I mean, you guys do what you want, but for me, it's NVIDIA all the way. Now, I have 32 gigabytes of G.Skill RipjawSX series RAM. It's DDR3. I know there's DDR4 out now, but DDR3 seemed to work just fine for me at this present moment, and they really fly. But here's one thing that we gotta think about. When you pick your motherboard, you wanna make sure that your RAM works with the motherboard. I was able to go on ASRock's website and actually find that specific type of RAM listed as something that was compatible with the motherboard. I also did that with other components as well, just to make sure that we're not gonna have any issues, any crashing, anything like that. One time I actually bought some Corsair RAM, 32 gigabytes. I can't remember what type it was, but anyway, it would not work in my computer on the motherboard I had previously. And I kept getting these crashes, and maybe every third boot up, the computer would freeze up and I would get a blue screen. So you really wanna make sure your RAM is compatible with your hard drive, and that's a big thing. And they're not always gonna tell you to check for that. Now, some people think that 32 gigabytes is overkill, and it may be for certain games and stuff like that, but for video editing, I really think 32 gigabytes is the way to go, especially because of all the RAM previews and all the RAM that Premiere and After Effects and Photoshop utilize. Honestly, 32 gigabytes may not even be enough for certain situations. So I love 32, and I wouldn't go with any less. The CPU is the i7-4790K, and of course, the K means that it's overclockable, so I have it overclocked to 4.5 gigahertz right now. I also have this Corsair H60 water cooler with the radiator right here, pushing air out this way so that it's nice and cool inside, and I can overclock this, I can render for hours on end, and it never really gets above 80 degrees Celsius. Now, overclocking a CPU might reduce its life a little bit, especially if you don't have it properly cooled. So if you're reaching high temperatures, you really want to get a new cooler or drop your clock because you don't want to burn out your CPU. And I'm pretty sure that overclocking negates any sort of warranty with your CPU, so be careful. You can actually download a program that monitors and tells you what the temperatures for all the cores are, and I'll actually put the name of that program below along with the link. And that's really helpful if you are overclocking or if you just seeded this thing and you want to know exactly how it works. So, in addition to components, you also want to think about heat management. Like I said earlier, I have a cooler on the CPU, keeps it nice and warm but not hot. And then we also have to make sure that our GPU doesn't overheat. Of course, it does have fans. I think it has 2 fans. But anyway, what we want to make sure is that we have a flow of air around the case. So my power supply is the EVGA 650 Supernova GS. It's 80 plus gold rated in terms of energy efficiency. Also, the power supply is modular, which means you can take out all these cords if you don't need them. And actually, I do have a small collection of cords that could potentially fit into this that I just don't need. Really helps reduce clutter instead of having a non-modular power supply where you have all these tentacles that you just have to stow away somehow. It doesn't even spin its fan unless it really needs to. So most of the time it's off. So we don't really take that into account, but air intake is right here. This is actually an open panel. So air goes through here, And then I have a fan on this side. When I open up at the front, that fan is pushing out this way. But the next fan up on the front is actually pushing air this way. And then the radiator and the fan on the radiator for the CPU cooler is also pushing air out this way. So we have air on the bottom going this way, we have air on the top going this way. And so if anything happens inside, it's gonna be in a spinning motion. No fans are directed at each other because otherwise turbulence happens and you don't really get optimal cooling inside of your case. So anyway, air and air sound effects really help. This case also has a lot more fan capability like this. There's actually panels on top you can take off and you can have a really large CPU radiator up there, but I didn't really find that was necessary. Now that's pretty much it. Now as a video editor, I do a lot of wedding videos and stuff. I'm always burning videos to DVD and to Blu-ray. So because I have two Blu-ray burners here, I can burn a DVD on one and a Blu-ray on the other at the same time, and they both spit out after a little while, and it's really cool to be able to do that both in tandem. Plus, if you're a video editor and you want to make sure you get stuff out timely, I've had these drives, these Blu-ray and DVD drives burn out on me before, and I had to wait to get a new one, I had to go to the store or whatever. To have two is kind of a backup solution for what you need to do on a timely basis. Now there is enough room inside the case to have a fan cooler, you know, something that actually spins as opposed to having a liquid coolant to a radiator. But I think you can actually go cheaper on the liquid cooler instead of going expensive on a fan cooler. And the fan cooler might create more noise anyway. This thing is actually pretty quiet. Of course, there is a fan on the radiator itself, but I think it's more efficient with the liquid coolant, and that's just me. So the main takeaway here is that you just want to make sure that those critical components to video editing are up to par and they're compatible. Like I said, you can research the motherboard website. Most motherboards have a website with a compatibility sheet. Also, Premiere loves the GTX 1080. I really enjoy that, and the CUDA cores are utilized wonderfully by the Mercury acceleration engine. Now, some would say that the power supply here, 650 watts, is not enough. I have not found that to be. I think 650 is just fine. The GTX 1080 is actually very power efficient, more power efficient than like a 980 Ti or even a 970. So 650 watts with what I have here is actually still more than I need. If I were to add a second GTX 1080, I would kind of just have to see how it ran, but I'm pretty sure I could do it. Now my hard drives are a mixture of solid state and regular mechanical hard drives, but I'll talk more about those in depth in the next video when we talk about video storage and backup solutions and what a video editor has to take into account in terms of drive management. All right guys, I can go into greater detail about a lot of this, but that's just an overview of what you need to think about when you're building your own video editing computer. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you like the video, subscribe, give me a like and a comment if you have something to say, or if you have something to ask. And keep an eye out for the next video when we talk about video storage and backups and drive management. All right, guys, thanks so much. Take care.